Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Free American Hour. I'm your host, Clay Douglas. And my guest today is Charles Miller, and Heather's on the line with us. Hi, folks. How are you?
Good morning, Clay. We're great. Heather may be muted out.
I'm here.
Okay. This is Heather and Chief Giraffe.
Good morning.
Good morning. Now, something just happened in California. In the press release that I have on October 11th, 2011, at approximately 2 o'clock p.m., the trustees of the People's Public Trust of the state of California, accompanied by the trustees of National Public Trust 1776, duly disqualified all the judges of the state of California from hearing any cases involving banks, bank instruments, and bank collections due to corruption of the people's public officers by the banks in order to validate their fraud. The national trustees provided technical and legal expertise in dealing with the people's public office during service of disqualification on the California Attorney General and Governor Jerry Brown. That expertise was well needed. When Governor Brown's office reviewed the content of the disqualifications, then ordered Kevin Wilson, its legal officer, to not accept service. However, service was duly made on the governor when William Robinson finally accepted the copies. Until the corruption is fully dealt with, it's expected that the people's public officers will flat out refuse to perform their duties and obligations to serve and protect the people. The disqualification in California follows on the heels of the disqualification of all judges of the state of Washington late last month. All right, that's your press release. Now, explain to me what's going on here. What's happened here? I mean, as far as I can tell, in all of my years of broadcasting and interviewing people, the judges simply work for the banks. They're the revenue officers, just like the police, and they're trying to put as many of us in jail and make us homeless and steal our property as possible for a criminal state. What's happening? What's your take on this? And how did you get involved in this?
Well, Clay, I'll start with a little background.
Okay.
I'm 62. I spent 12 years and 6 months and 13 days in federal prison for attempting to take on the bank system in some of the local western states and in the international forum back in the 90s. I've been out for a little over 2 years. And we discovered while I was in prison that the federal government and the state governments are all public trusts. The trusts were created by the people, and there's a descending order of how these things seem to flow. First of all, there's the creator. Second of all, there would be me and my personal relationship there. I use the term creator qualifiedly. A rose is a rose is a rose, so it doesn't matter how you approach creation. Once you recognize it's there, it creates obligations. And the third level would be us. In this case, you, Clay, and Heather, with me. We decide to make an agreement. That would be the fourth level. The fifth level would be the memorialization of our agreement. That would be the state constitution. The fifth level would be the government. The title of the government, the state of Washington or the state of California. And the sixth level would be the branches created under it, and the seventh level would be their various operational opportunities. So the people are in first position. When we make our agreement, we create a document called, and when you read it as a contract, it's actually a trust. It's an agreement between people to do something. We create an artificial entity to operate for us. It's not a corporation, it's a trust. We all agree. We place our political will together to create a political body to hold all of the powers of the created instrument, the government, the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. Now, as most of us know that listen to your show, along 1933 or so, that whole situation changed. Prior to that, the people have worked for the government itself. We're the public trustees for us. they operated the government, while not always in a clean manner, but at least in a manner that was accessible to us. Since the 30s, their corporate status has changed. They became private franchises for profit. And in doing so, they abandoned their original trust in the people. And as most people understand trust...
Let me interrupt you. You're talking about the Emergency Banking Act, March 9th, 1933?
Yes, sir.
Declared by President Roosevelt to bring being bankrupt and insolvent. So
yes.
they basically handed us over en masse to the bankers who are the receivers of this bankruptcy.
That's correct.
And of course, anytime you go against them, then you're being anti-government. And of course, I started the militias. What part of the Second Amendment don't they understand? And I did it, not in some back alley, some terrorist group, but I did it in the governor's office. And I've been demonized ever since that. They don't tell you. I started it in the governor's office. And I thought I did that in response to what happened at Waco. But you kind of put a different light on the picture. I mean, this not even the government doing this to us. It's the government is working for the banksters. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's paid by the banks. The way that it actually works out, there's only one bank in the country. The whole money system is private. So if every bank in the country is using a private money, operating under the same procedures set out by the private money owners and enforced by the committees that are paid, the courts and the law enforcement and so on, there's only one bank. So as we discovered across the board beginning in 2004, that all of the public trusts have been abandoned. Under trust law, if a trust is abandoned, and under abandonment law, anyone can move in and pick up the property. The property, the trust, is actually the people's political will. And I've been around the so-called sovereignty movement for a long time, and I'd like to clear up a point about sovereignty. Sovereignty is a false concept. And the reason I say that, and I say it in such strong terms, is that in order for there to be sovereign, there has to be a subject. Now, there's two kinds of subjugation. It's voluntary and involuntary. And when you're not told everything that's going on about how your government, the ones that we the people created, that subject status becomes involuntary. And another real nice name for that, slavery. So the individuals in California and the National Trust, in discovering this, and we made pledges of our political will to the trust. That's the only property that the public trust holds that created it, the so-called resident trust. So once we recognized that the trust had been abandoned and filled the position, then the trustees have an absolute duty to protect the trust itself. The trust itself is the original state constitution, because that's the only legal relationship between the people and any form of government here. The people have no legal relationship with the federal government. Article 7 of the federal constitution, when it states that the agreement to create the federal United States in its current operating form under the federal constitution is simply an agreement between artificial persons created by we the people. And we're not represented there, the states are. None of the people are spoken of there. When it says we the people in the preamble, that's all fine and good. However, we the people aren't represented in the authority to decide the document. And if you review the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, in particular the Northwest Ordinance 1 Statute 51, and the ordinances taken in under the Articles of Confederation, it always says this is done in the name and by the authority of the good people. So the public trust in California and in Washington served various branches of the government and told them that, hey, this is our law, our common law, and in both states, common law is the rule of decision. We issued writs of quo warranto, show your authority, and prohibition until you can. That protects everyone, and in both cases we attached the information off of the state websites regarding retirement benefit programs for all state employees. And they're heavily invested in bank product. which would be mortgage-backed securities for one, and a lot of other bank issues for two.
Now, let me just.
Held in foreign banks.
I mean, this to me, this is the one of the largest broad daylight thefts in history. I mean, George Bush, an outgoing president, was walking out the swinging door and handed a couple of $1 trillion to the banks, and we're even paying the banks interest on the money that they loaned us to give back to them. I mean, this sounds crazy to even say this, but that's exactly what happened, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there's some misconceptions about this so-called $2 trillion and what Bush actually did and what he's liable for.
Okay, then set me straight, please.
Well, Clay, can I bind you to a debt to Heather that you don't know anything about, and can I sign your name without your consent, making you liable for the debt?
If you're the IRS, I suppose you can get away with it.
Go. So, if I enforce that through either the court system or at the end of a gun, that would be slavery, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Okay. So, no one can explain to me whether the American people agreed in any sense whatsoever to be responsible for the issuer of the debt, Mr. Bush, and who he says we owe. Bush just told all of us we don't have any choice, we owe somebody else. So if you take that concept to its logical conclusion, that no one can bind you to a debt unless you consent, would that necessarily mean that none of the American people are responsible for the debt to the bank? Because we certainly didn't promise them to pay them.
That's ideally, if we're working for the people. You know, it's kind of like McCarthy said to Forrestal, James Forrestal, Assistant Secretary of Defense at the time, said something about the communists being stupid, and he said, no, consistency is not the mark of stupidity. If they were just stupid, occasionally they'd make a mistake in our favor.
Yeah, that's true. Well, they've made a mistake in our favor. We just have to learn to look at it correctly. The real issue is this, and simply this. You can believe something is true, but when you come up against the actual fact, you have a choice to make, whether to believe the lie or deal with the fact. The fact is, no one can bind us to debt unless we consent. That's slavery, isn't it?
Yes.
Well,
and the judges are a heavy part of tossing the medical profession too, but because they're finding so many of us so in need of being enslaved or drugged, they're actually doing the same thing they did to the Chinese with the opium and heroin at the turn of the century.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're profiting. I mean, I got their profit margins here. You know, 200,000% markup to keep you on Prozac.
Yeah, I've seen more than enough of that. So as we began to understand these concepts a little deeper, we looked at the money system. What's the actual value of the money system? The actual fact of the matter is that there's only two assets on the planet. Raw materials that came with the planet. None of us created those, so we really can't own them. They were a gift from the Creator, and we're supposed to take care of them. And labor. Labor backs all money systems. It doesn't matter whether you believe a gold system is valuable or a fiat paper system is valuable. When you use it, you have to understand that the only thing that backs it is labor. The guys that dug the gold out of the ground and smelted it, turned it into coin, and put it into commerce in exchange for their other product, the core of everything is labor. So that wouldn't necessarily mean that all money systems are labor management systems.
You know, I've looked for answers, and the best answer that I've been able to come up with in 25 years of dealing with the bankers and the whole police state is the self-sufficient family farm, the basis of every civilization. If we got back and started growing hemp again, started growing our own food instead of genetically modified crap, we generated our own power straight from what God gave us, the sun and the wind, and the magnetics, then we don't need the banks. We don't need to be in that system forever. And then we're living by our own labor, by what we produce. That's the way this whole country was formed. You know, and that's why our founding fathers wrote the Constitution the way they did, and the Bill of Rights the way they did, is to preserve that type of. Back when, what, 30 years, or only 50 years ago, 40% of the people in America lived and worked on farms. Today, it's under 5%.
Yeah. Well, there's your basic labor situation. You got a partnership between the earth and the man. The man plants a seed of corn, that's his part of the labor, and the earth and creation provides sun and rain. So when the harvest is ready, the man goes and puts his labor in it, and now he's got a valuable commodity to trade with someone else. The core essential issue there is exactly like I said, the gift from Creator in the planet, and then the labor to change it to something else. So if you look at our federal system, our private money system, the only thing that backs is labor. So we figured out in a very simple manner that the labor actually controls is the only value in the system. Then we looked at their system completely, and what we found is that the only liable party on any kind of debt instrument is the issuer, or the ultimate issuer. In this case, the ultimate issuer would be N.M. Rothschilds and Sons, because they own all the central banks around the world. And as owners of the central banks, they are the ones that issue all the debt instruments, aren't they? It doesn't matter if they're working through the Federal Reserve, or they're working through the IMF, or the EU, or whatever. The system is still the same. It's all based on labor. Whether they denominate the transaction in gold or currency or glyphs on a screen, it doesn't much matter. The value, the true value, the equity in the whole system is labor. And if those people, the Rothschilds in particular, through the Federal Reserve, and in conjunction with their private U.S. Treasury, which the Rothschilds own as well, and the private U.S. government corporation, which the Rothschilds own as well, then they would be the only liable parties for all of that, wouldn't they?
Yes.
So once you understand that the Rothschilds are the liable party in all of that, what does that do to the American people? Does that free us up from the debt payment everybody believes we're living under? And does that create the situation where we now have the understanding that not only can we cancel the debt claims against us, we can stop paying interest to someone on a fraud, can't we?
I would say they owe us a few gazillion dollars for all the interest they've already collected off of us. I mean, we've been debt slave, and I just, before you came on in the hour preceding this, I played statements from Germany, and that's exactly what Hitler was saying. I mean, he wasn't raving about, he was just saying the Jews control the money. The money is, and you know, we want to get back to our productivity, you know, our labor. It was the Jews that declared war on Hitler, and we had 3 Jewish-controlled countries that ganged up on Germany. I mean, if you're...
World War II was actually the situation they were going after the bank system. Hitler created a public money system for private use.
Yes.
So we put the pieces together in the filings in California and Washington. And when you look at the state website, you can see there in black and white, published by the agents that supposedly represent us, they actually don't. I don't know about you, but whenever I worked for anybody my whole life, and like I said, I'm 62, whoever pays me is the boss. So if the judges and the executive branch and all the congressional people in the state and at the federal level, retirement benefit programs are vested in bank product, and they're being paid in private money, I would say that they work for the bank. Whoever pays the bill's the boss. So that's not an acceptable situation. Every American understands that you cannot have one party paid to be neutral and yet be paid by one of the parties and have a fair deal.
It's kind of like it's kind of like trying to get the BATF to investigate the gun running to the drug dealers in Mexico.
Yeah. They're getting their cuts, so it's all going to the bank, isn't it?
Yeah, all the whole thing about the drug. I mean, they're using the drugs. To me, that was the first. That was the installation of the police state in America, when they can come up to somebody on the street and go, "Hey, what do you got? What's that you got in your pocket there, son? We heard you. That I think that's cocaine. Man, we're gonna have to. You're gonna get some time for that. You know, that's illegal." I mean, and if the CIA is bringing the drugs into this country like they did through Mena, Arkansas, I mean, this is just another form of slavery. I mean, taking it a step further. I mean, they are actually training our children in schools right now to be in prison. The schools are run in the libraries, and the hall monitors and the cameras in the hallways look identical to maximum security prisons.
Yeah, that's all true. We decided that it's enough.
And you've been in a prison. Why? I mean, was it this? I've done time for talking about the drug trade. I was in the paraphernalia industry for many years. I got put in jail with Tommy Chong got put in jail for that kind of crap, and then they went after so-called tax protesters. And I told people, man, Lynn Meredith and Irwin Schiff might be absolutely right. They may be absolutely right on, but it's a little like going up to Al Capone and going, "Hey, Al, I found out extortion's not legal, and I'm not paying you anymore."
Yeah, that's exactly right. So we decided that we're trying to put the truth out exactly the way it is. As we all know, the whole system worldwide is based on programming. People operate on their beliefs. They believe one thing and something else is true. And the only thing that stands across the table all the time is absolute truth. So what we place in the court system in Washington and in California is absolute truth. And this truth is absolutely backed up and verifiable by the government's own publications off of their own websites in their own black and white words. The way that we look at it is that everything that the government publishes, whether it's a city or a county or a state or the federal government, all of those statements they make are promises for them to perform. And the principle we work with there is very simple. Number one, all law is contract. Number two, all law is private between the parties. And number three, all law deals with property and property rights. So when you come to the money system, the property right that's actually on trial there is the use of your labor, whether you own it or don't, and whether it can be taken from you by deception. And as over the last 2.5, 3 years, I looked into the mortgage situation. Heather's been doing it longer. I'll let her explain her story in a minute. Is that the actual fact of the matter is it's so simple that most people miss it. When there is no evidence of a loan, there can be no collectible debt. In other words, all the arguments about the procedural issues, particularly like this came out in the Supreme Court of Massachusetts, voiding all the mortgage foreclosures for 5 years, the core of the issue is the banks cannot prove that they loaned you anything. If they can't show that they gave you something of value, they have nothing to collect.
It's all digital entries, and they're preparing. Aren't they preparing us for that right now? I mean, you've got advertisements on TV for the little health link they call that chip, the little chip. Aaron Russo told us they want to go to, put your bank account in that little chip in your hand, and. All of the whole thing's been set in motion, and now they're even using these Wall Street protests to try to find something wrong with paper money, for God's sake.
Yeah, the system is one based on manipulation. So the only way that you can fight manipulation is absolute truth. Well, a lot of what goes on around us is talking about the problem. Okay. And I'll use an allegory to explain how futile that is. You can have the whole Rose Bowl Stadium, 101,000 people talking about problems. And the only thing that will come out of there is a problem. That's the only thing on the table. Whereas you can have 25 of us out in the parking lot having a good time discussing the solutions and solutions only, and that's what will come out of that discussion. And we've chosen consciously, in looking at all these things all the way through, everything that you mentioned and more, to focus on solutions only. Why would we ever engage in discussing the problem when we know the problem has no validity for us in the future? It just brings the problem that we're dealing with into the present moment. So if we begin to focus on solutions and absolute truth, that will be the result. The absolute truth is laid in those documents. We've had a number of people calling and say your procedure is incorrect, you should have done it this way, you should have done it that way. But the actual fact of the matter is we went and did it. We gave a chance to every other state in the union to do the same thing. For the people to come forward and say this is not acceptable, and to do it in a manner that's authorized by the law that we created, the state constitutions. Heather, in background, this client is very unique. First of all, she was an attorney. She turned her bar card last March. I want to explain why. The second thing is she was a former prosecutor. And when she first got out of law school, and then later again, she was trained by the International Bank System to be a compliance officer to assist in cleaning up this mess. She's got 4 children. She works very hard at what she does and stays focused on solutions and solutions only. And Heather, you want to tell everybody where you started in this mess and how many mortgages you reviewed for us to come to these conclusions?
Oh, okay. Well, good morning to everyone, and good morning. Well, here's how it started. At least in bank trade and finance, I was trained at the highest levels of bank trade and finance, and my main mentor was from the Swiss banking system, who had 30 plus years, and he just worked in every currency system that there is. And when I went in to look at everything, I was asked to essentially do like an internal stress test. That's what you can equate it to go in and see if the system, if there were viable solutions to survive within the current money system, the current private money system. And the answer was no. The fraud and the corruption and the crimes were just so rampant that even at the highest levels of bank trade and finance, they were feeling the effects, which everyone down on Main Street was feeling. So the conclusion was no. So then the answer was, well, go find a solution. And the only solution at the end was that everything needed to be changed back to what it was prior to this Federal Reserve and the 2 test reserves prior to that, which is the public money system. So then there has to be a focus. What can touch every person's life across the planet, which is a loan. Okay, so we looked specifically at mortgages. This was back in '09, because the complacency of the banks and the brazen procedures that they were using, they were just so lazy they couldn't even keep their own paper trail straight. So